everybody, welcome to Chinese Pod. I'm Joy.
And I'm Joe.
And today we're going to talk about the Chinese character Lao, which means old. What is the very first word you've learned with this word?
Probably teacher, 老师.
老师, so that's third tone, first tone, of course. And that literally means an old master, but not really physically old, just somebody who's esteemed. Have you ever heard of Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher?
Oh, yeah. Wait, how would you say that in English? I think he has many names to go with, like lousy, lazy, laozi. In German, we say laozi.
Okay, that's actually pretty accurate pronunciation-wise. So you can Google Lao Tzu, and he's the founder of Taoism. So actually, Lao here, he's old and he's esteemed. So it basically means an old, esteemed teacher. So we're going to be talking about all the different uses of Lao. Sometimes it's physical age. Sometimes it's sort of a word that goes with another word, and it rolls off quite nicely off your tongue. And there are even some animals, but the animals aren't old. So we'll talk about this later. Joe, what's your last name in Chinese?
Li, 木子李.
Mu Zi Li. So we can see the word as mu on the top, zi on the bottom. So Mu Zi Li. We can say this is a way to introduce our last names. So if we're really close, I would call you Lao Li. Not
Li.
because you're old, but
Yeah,
sort of like
thank you.
endearing. Like sort of like, you know, when people say like old Lee, or they're like,
Oh,
oh,
like old pal?
Yeah. Like my old pal Lee. So they're kind of like, oh, old Lee or something like that. So Lao Li.
So, could I call you Lao Lin?
Hey, that's an awesome name. Hope you got that trademarked.
Well, I tried, but it got refused.
And did you fight it? Man, you can't put all this money into your brand without knowing that your brand is protected.
Well, the trademark office refused it. So what can I do?
Actually, you can do a lot about this. The attorneys at trademarkers.com are dealing with refusals all the time, and in many cases can salvage your trademark by adding disclaimers or arguing against objections from the trademark office. And did you know that if there are other earlier trademarks that pose an obstacle to your registration, there are ways to require them to actually prove actual use and have them cancelled if they are not being used? Just contact the professionals at trademarkers.com. With a network of attorneys in more than 60 countries, we make sure your brand is protected. Trademarkers.com.
That would be like calling my dad.
Oh.
Because you usually, and I'm like, where's my dad? Lao Ling. So it's a term for a guy. Like when you say like old Lee, it's not like old Sarah or a Mrs. So this is like an endearing way. So you can say Lao Ling, Lao Li, Lao Liu, whatever the person's last name is. And you would use it when you have a close relationship to them, almost as if they were your family friend or like the neighborhood, you know, tea, drink seller or something like that.
The first definition of Lao that you probably learn in your classes or in your textbook is just plain old.
Literally very old.
Do we have some examples where it's really just in the meaning of old?
So for example, we can say old street, that's 老街.
老街.
老街, third tone, first tone. So we can talk about old street, like a physically old street, but usually it has some sort of historical significance and it's known. So people are like, take me to the old street. Take me to 老街. Do you know any old streets in Europe?
I mean, we have probably the Champs-Élysées. Oh no, that's too big. A small. Oh, we have some very small roads that are called 老街 in Germany. But I can think of one example which is in London, which is actually called Old Street. It's a subway station and a like small street.
So this name of the street is Old Street. So 老街, or we can say 伦敦老街, the London Old Street. All right, let me give you a sentence for the next time you're in Beijing. 我要到北京老街吃烤鸭. I want to go to Beijing Old Street to have roast duck. So 前门大街, that's a famous place for roast duck.
Sounds good.
Ooh, yeah, now I'm hungry. Okay, the next old word we're going to talk about, old songs. These are our classics. That's 老歌.
老歌.
老歌. So third tone, first tone. Joe, do you know any 老歌?
So you mean like Backstreet's back, all right.
How old are you? That's not old enough to be a 老歌.
To me, that sounds very old. No?
Oh my gosh, are you super young?
Maybe.
Super young, a little bit older, like a classic.
Oh, you mean like ABBA, Queen, Beatles? Okay.
老歌, those are our classics. Or we can say 经典老歌.经典老歌 is our classic old songs. What about some Chinese ones?
I learned one in my Chinese class before. Wait, what was that? 你问我爱你有多深，我爱你有几分。But what's the name of that?
月亮代表我的心. So that's a classic by Deng Lijun or Teresa Tang. So you can go Google it. The song is amazing. The moon represents my heart, as Joe's beautiful singing is. So that's one of the absolute Chinese classics. 老歌 or 经典老歌. Joe, 你喜欢老歌吗?
还好。
Joe doesn't really like them because he's too young.
I'm more like the Backstreet Boys guy.
So you can say, 我不太喜欢老歌. I don't really like old songs, maybe because there's not as much of an emotional connection.
Yeah.
我很喜欢老歌.
Do you?
I do.
Oh.
I can appreciate them as a not super old person. Okay, let's talk about another thing that's old and has a lot of nostalgic memories. Our old home or our childhood home is 老家. 老家.
So it's again third and first tone, right? 老
Third, first.
家.
Exactly. And this home is not so much that it's physically old, but like a childhood. So it has a lot of memories that's tied to it. Joe, 你的老家在哪儿?
我的老家在柏林。
啊，柏林，你想念你的老家吗？
一点儿。
Okay, now we're going to talk about titles that use the word 老, but these people are not actually old. So the most common one you hear is husband and wife. And husband is 老公,
老公。
老公, which literally translates to
Old. 公 is
like grandpa.
grandpa.
Your old
grandpa.
old man, old grandpa, 老公. These are colloquial, so you're not going to find them in an official document. 老公, husband, and wife is 老婆,
老婆。
and 婆 is
Wife, ma,
like grandma.
grandma. So it's like old pa and old ma,
Old pa and old ma.
but it's a wife and husband.
Wife
husband
and
wife.
Okay, let's do a dialogue. You can be 老公, I
Okay.
can be 老婆.
Okay.
So I'm going to call my 老公. 老公,你什么时候回家?
老婆，我还在工作。
Oh, again? I guess I'm gonna go shopping by myself. 那我自己去逛街。
你去吧。Now that we used old lady and old pa to speak about wife and husband, how would we actually use 老 to speak about my mother or my father?
So your mother and your father, it's your old man and your old lady, right? So that's 老妈, my mother, old mother, or 老爸, old father, my father. Now we would use this when we're complaining about your mother or your father, or just kind of making a joke when you're calling them, like, 老妈, my mother. All right, I'm gonna tell you something my mother says.
Okay.
老妈说不要这么晚回家.
So your mom says you should not come home so late.
Yeah. What about your dad?
我老爸说不可以抽烟。
不可以抽烟. Very bad. It's bad for your health.
Yes.
Bad habits. So our parents don't want us to come home late or smoke, which is reasonable.
Yeah, it is actually. There's another word starting with lao that you as a foreigner, or me and you as a foreigner, will hear very often, which is lao wai. So it's basically old and wise and outside together.
老外. So you might think that sounds a bit rude because 外 is outside. So why are we considering somebody as an outsider? It doesn't seem very equal. But in the Chinese culture, there is a clear differentiation between the in-group and out-group. And it's a category that's not personal. It is differential though. 老外.
So in the beginning, you may feel a little bit like weird about it because depending on the culture you're coming from, for example, Germany for me, we don't use the word foreigner at all because we do think it has a very negative connotation. And that can be the case for you as well. But if you hear lao wai in Chinese, it does not necessarily have that connotation, so you don't have to feel attacked or offended by it.
I do like that lao does mean an esteemed wise person. So you are foreign, but you are esteemed and you will teach us many things. All right, I got one last one for you, and that's 老板. 老板 is your old boss man. So this is a formal term. Do you hear it a lot? Of course.
Yeah, 老板, the boss, right?
就是一个老板.
Yeah, I have a small business going.
Oh, 就是一个老板. Or when you are messaging somebody or speaking to somebody, you can say 老板. That's a phrase that's respectful to call them.
Remember that in these words, we use the word lao because originally we wanted to pay respect to these people. We wanted to say my dear wife, my dear husband, and all these things. But nowadays, it's this respectful thing is not necessarily anymore. As we learned, you can use these words sometimes to even complain about your mother or your father. So the connotation is already a little bit different, but they come from this respectful meaning of lao.
Okay, so now I'm going to talk about 3 animals that have the character lao in their names. Now, they're not old, but we definitely sort of fear and respect them, or at least want to stay away from them. The first animal is the tiger. That's 老虎. 老虎. And in Chinese, you must learn this because of that song. How does it go?
两只老虎，两只老虎，跑得快，跑得快。
And you must know this. So you can Google it. The song is called 两只老虎, 2 tigers. And they run really quickly. So 跑得快. 两只老虎跑得快. It's sort of like a rhyme that rolls off your tongue. The second animal is 老鹰. 老鹰.
Which is eagle.
Yes, the eagle.
So you want to learn traditional or simplified characters?
Can I just learn to speak Chinese? I really don't want to write or read. It's too much for me.
Are you one of the learners that told us early on that you just want to speak and listen to Chinese and you think Chinese characters are way too complicated? Then I really think you should check out our new introduction into how to read and write Chinese characters. It focuses on simple characters that you encounter in a Chinese language environment every day. In 11 entertaining episodes, we set out to convince you that Chinese characters are actually quite easy, and we hope that you will soon share our excitement. Visit 88 characters on www.chinesepod.com/88 and give it a try. Or search for the first episodes on the Chinese Pod channel on YouTube. It's as simplified as that.
I think you might not be afraid of it, but it's definitely esteemed.
You should probably stay away from an eagle nest though. So yeah, I can...
True. And that bald eagle on the American flag does look very esteemed. Respect them. A sign of courage. 老鹰. 老鹰. I have a question for you. Joe, 你害怕老鹰吗？
我害怕老鹰。
我也害怕老鹰. We're both afraid of eagles. Don't want to get too close to them.
Yeah, you shouldn't.
Okay, the third animal that we might be afraid of, especially if you've been to Asia, you might be afraid of them because they look scary. 老鼠.
老鼠, which is mouse or mice in plural.
Or rat. 老鼠. So why would we probably be afraid of them or respect them? I don't respect the mouse. I'm sorry.
I don't really respect them though, but I mean, people do get scared by them when they see them, right? So
They are
you
to
can
be
still
feared.
understand like why you should pay respect to them in terms of fear them.
Yeah, you'd be afraid of them because they run around wherever there's street food and they'll look at you with their big eyes and evil grins. You'd be afraid of them. So 老鼠, I think that's the funniest one though.
Yeah.
老鼠，就你害怕老鼠吗？
我不怕，但是我觉得很恶心。
So now I'm going to use 老 in terms of old in the past, like time. For example, I can say, this is an old place, but it's not actually that the place is old. It's like it's our place, our secret place. We call that 老地方. 老地方, 地方 means place. So I could say, we are going to that one place we always go to, that convenience store. Have you ever heard this term before?
Yeah, sometimes when you're going out with friends or something and they ask you like where do you want to go and you're just like I don't know where. Oh, just like the same as always. 老地方.
It's like that one place, that one cafe. Exactly. And one more. 老样子.
Oh, I know this one. This is actually very useful because when you have your, like, for example, restaurants that you always go to and you always order the same things, I do that sometimes, you can just tell them 我要老样子. Like, I want to have the same as always.
And 样子 translates to the type, the look. So that 老样子 is like that same thing or that same look. Now, I can also say somebody is 老样子. So I can say 就好久不见. Haven't seen you in a long time. 还是老样子.
Ah, so I'm still the same even after not seeing you for a while.
Same old self. I've got another one for you. This one's my favorite. An old friend, 老朋友,老朋友. So if it's an old friend, it's going to be somebody from your past. They're not physically old. Okay, but let's bring all of them together in a sentence.
Okay.
Okay, I have an example sentence for you for all of them. 昨天我见了我的老朋友.
So yesterday you met your old friend
我们去了老地方.
and you went to the same place as always or your place.
That one cafe. 他还是老样子.
And he's still the same.
Exactly the same. And don't you love it when that happens? though?
Yeah, it's like or when you see a friend that you haven't seen for ages and then it still feels like, oh, I've seen you last week, and you immediately connect as if you did before. It's
No
nice.
time has passed.
Yeah. So after talking about the usage of 老 today, I want to recap what we've had. So the first thing we talked about was teacher, right? Teacher is
老师.
so you can imagine someone like very old and wise, a respectful person. It's basically all the meanings that covers this word 老 already. So we have the first meaning was like old, just old. How could we, for example, say an old street?
老街.
Or an old song,
Oh, 老歌.
a classic, an old song. And then we talked more about this meaning of respectfulness or wiseness, but only in the origin, because we had many words that we use today that you don't really see the respectfulness anymore, but they're still there originally. So we had, for example, wife and husband,
老公,老婆.
or mother and father,
老妈,老爸.
and boss and
Foreigner.
foreigner.
老板,老外.
Then we talked about some animals that you should maybe fear or respect. So we had the tiger here.
That's 老虎.
After that, we talked about 老 as in saying old ways, the old place, or an old friend.
So the old way is 老样子, same as always. Old friend, 老朋友. And old place or our place, that's 老地方. Okay, I have one more for you, which is pretty interesting. Who is this person? Name is 老天爷.
Like the old sky grandpa?
Yes, the man in the clouds.
You mean God?
Something like that.
Something like that?
So God, the man in the clouds, is 老天爷. So 爷is like your grandpa. So when you say 老天爷, it's kind of like, oh my God.
Oh.
Or you can say 我的老天 emphatically.
Oh my god.
我的老天 exactly. So it's very dramatic. Okay, thanks for joining us today. I hope you liked our episode about Lao. I'm Joy.
And I'm Joe.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
As usual, ChinesePod provides an extensive selection of learning materials for this lesson on its website, www.chinesepod.com. You can access this lesson directly with the lesson number 4368. So just go to www.chinesepod.com/4368 and you will find a transcript, vocabulary, and much more. The link again, www.chinesepod.com/4368.
Chinese Pod.